Oh, we're live. Does that mean we're actually officially live? YouTube said we were. This is nuts. Supposedly got 15 people watching. That's cool. You might have to bear with us to a degree, guys, because we've never gone live on YouTube before. So yeah, I'm here to answer any questions you may have about your reactive dog. We've made a decision as a company, actually. We're now gonna purely work with dog reactivity. It's kind of organically fallen that way anyway. If you don't know, obviously I compete with my dog. We do puppy, or we did puppy classes, so on and so forth. And but our bread and butter stuff was, or has been for a while now, dog reactivity. So that's what our channel is going to focus on, including these lives and so on and so forth. So good morning, student for life dog training from Richmond, Virginia. Afternoon, Robin. Hope you're well. Hope you and your dog are well. If you're watching, do me a favor and throw where you're from in the chat box. That would be helpful. Tell me about your dog too, if you're struggling with some sort of reactivity issue or whatever. Oh, hi, Marta. How's it going? Thanks for joining. Good to see you. Hope you guys are well. Greetings from Germany. Thanks for your great work. All good. Robin, my dog's being a bit of a knob at the moment. You've enjoyed the content. Good morning from NJ. I presume that's New Jersey. Good morning or good afternoon from Italy. Good afternoon, Petra. Puerto Rico. Hi from Louisiana. Hey, this is fun. We got 32 people in now. This is exciting. So I'm in the, we're at the new training school. If you didn't know, we've had a bit of an upgrade. Partially thanks to YouTube, I think, since YouTube's taken off. So it's kind of the business and stuff. So we've upgraded to like a big, I don't know, 10,000 square foot unit with 3 acres. So upgrade from the whole stable. If you didn't know, fun fact for you guys, the last studio we had, believe it or not, was a horse stable. So we've talked about on the podcast and so on and so forth. But yeah, the last studio it was literally a horse stable that we gutted out. And if you've ever heard the Kung Fu Wasp story, I'll tell that when I've got more time. But yeah, we just took some decking, like decking board, and we decked the back, and then we put the shelving unit. This is like a real room, a real studio now. But prior to now, it was literally, yeah, a horse stable we decked out, trying to be resourceful. So yeah, right. What are the comments we got, guys? Hi from Louisiana. Where are we located? We're in Leeds, in the north of England. So obviously Yorkshire is the county, and then the city is is Leeds. I think it's the capital of Yorkshire. Some may disagree. I'm trying my best not to get cancelled today, by the way, guys, since being live and all. Got myself a drink, not sponsored. What else we got? Robin, do you know? Oh, I've already told you where we are. Yeah, we're in the north of England. Everyone outside of the UK believes like London is the center point of England. It's not. We're like 3.5 hours from London, north of. The north's way better than every other part of England by a long way. People are nicer. We got more space, more countryside. So, you know. What's my favorite breed of dog? If you're asking me, I've got 6 dogs. 2 of which are Malinois, 2 of which are crossbreeds, 2 of which are sausage dogs. So it's probably the Malinois. I'm not going to virtue signal and say it's anything else. I think they're great dogs. They're very capable dogs. They're phenomenally intelligent. They're easy to train to a degree. Or let's say they're easy to pick up behaviors. However, they're also quick to pick up the unwanted behaviors too, right? When we have a lot of drive, tenacity, and desire within a breed, sometimes that energy can be sent in the wrong place, right? That's why we see so many reactive working breeds. More and more people getting working breeds at the moment as their pet dogs. often neglecting that they are or once were a working breed of dog, and so um, if we neglect to give them outlets for their working desires, they'll become self-employed, is what I've said in the past, which could be through the means of barking at other dogs and people and chasing the postman, biting the postman on the ass, right? So, okay. Robin, I'd never seen a Malinois in person before seeing Stark in Texas. Very impressive dogs. Yeah, Leash has got a, a herder too called Texas. He's a really cool dog. He's coming along really nicely. Um, my German Shepherd has worked through his reactivity with me on walks, but when we're static in the pub, his reactivity returns. So this is because when a dog sees a trigger, they get drawn, they go into a heightened state of arousal, of course, and they struggle to process that arousal. It's processed by barking, lunging, growling, so on and so forth. As a rule of thumb, the more our dog is moving and the speed in which our dog is moving, the easier it is they're going to cope with triggers, right? So like the higher their arousal. So if I've got my dog playing ball, and this is why like sometimes people with border collies, when the dog's playing ball, fine. But when they're stationary, they're lying down and they're in a lower arousal state, the mismatch between their arousal and the other dog's arousal is what creates the reactivity. And so that's why when we're playing, when we're moving, and so on and so forth. So when we train reactivity out of dogs, we always start with the redirect drill. You'll see that lots in the channel. And that's because essentially moving to disengage from the trigger is way easier than like me putting the dog in the sit and expecting him to stay still and tolerate the presence of that other dog, right? And so, just like anything, we want to reduce the criteria. If we're working, we put our dog into a downstay. We're going to use fabricated distractions initially, moving, maybe get someone like throwing toys, testing the dog, or testing and trying to prove that behavior, maybe throwing food and trying to distract the dog, and then graduate to the point where we can work around stooge dogs and so on and so forth. So, yeah, that'll be why that is. Frank, my dog often raises his hackles, which is piloerectus, when he meets other dogs, especially if the other dog is reactive. Would you describe this as reactivity? Would you do something about it? If so, what? Really does depend. If my dog is just raising his hackles, he's just on the cusp of going and being defensive. He's just saying like, "Hey, I'm big. You don't want to start a fight with me," and that's why they do it, right? They make themselves bigger to kind of ward off any threats. So that other dog thinks, oh no, this German Shepherd's a big bastard. I don't want to start a fight with him. If it doesn't go any further than that, I wouldn't try and like correct or punish that. I think you create issues there. So he's just using a very energy efficient way in order to manage his space around him. And if we go and punish that, maybe then there's a chance that we take away an option. I don't think he can control it anyway, so not like this is actually going to pragmatically work in the first instance. But let's say it did. We go and punish that. He might pick another option, and that might be to bark, lunge, and growl, and then maybe a less energy efficient way to deal with or to control that space. So many Malinois being rehomed in my area. Owners who weren't responsible. Yeah, truth be told, I get a message every single day on Instagram with someone wanting to rehome a Malinois or a herder, Dutchie, lots of shepherds too. Every single day on our Instagram, people looking to rehome a dog. Unfortunately, like I don't have all the room in the world. There's no room in the inn in many instances, and so yeah, it's frustrating for sure. It's why we talk about the breed quite a lot on our channel. Very capable dogs. Like I said, once upon a time, they were used for genuine work, right? And hard work too. You know, these dogs are bred to tolerate war zones and tolerate gunfire, essentially. And so that makes for very strong dogs in some instances. They're not socialized correctly. They do have a bit of a defensive switch because that helps them cope better with threats. And if we don't socialize them and they deem most things to be a trigger to their defense or a threat, then of course they're going to do what their genetics tell them to do in terms of how to deal with compromising situations, which is to act aggressively. So either actual aggression or insinuated aggression. And so we got to be really careful with that breed of dog. They're not for the faint-hearted. I don't want to gatekeep the dog by any means, but at the same time, they need to go to a very capable, experienced hand, because if we do not channel from a very early age where that drive and tenacity needs to go, ultimately, it'll come out where we least want it in many instances, and that's usually through reactivity and biting people they shouldn't. Um, Even like people that are super active, I see it all the time. People that are into like hiking and shit like that. Um, they opt for something like the Malinois to try and keep up with their lifestyle, but we neglect to remember how capable this dog is, and is way beyond our own physical capability. And inevitably, what happens? We get a massive mismatch. I'm not saying if you have that dog, you need to go and work them, like actually work them, but like how we play with the dog is really important. And offering as close as we can an adequate substitute for their initial work purpose can go a really long way. Obviously, I compete in protection sports with my dog as is fulfillment on that side of things. But then I've worked with some great people that have that breed of dog, and we've shown them how to play correctly and play with conflict as opposed to avoiding conflict. That can serve as a way to satiate, should I say, that drive and desire. Hopefully that makes sense. Okay, where are we at? I've missed a couple of questions. My dog struggles with resource guarding. Any tips on how to fix it? Anytime we give him a new toy, he'll take it and keep it from us, even if it's a plastic bottle or sheet or paper. And then the question cuts off. We are able to take it away, uh, but I'd prefer he'd not have it. He's a Rottweiler, 5 years old, by the way. See a lot of resource guarding in Rottweilers, like a hell of a lot. Usually things that inanimate too. We always start treating resource guarding via play and teaching that dog how to share things of high value. So if you've ever seen any of my play tutorials on YouTube, especially the one with Kobe that we did fairly recently, maybe in the last couple of months, all intents and purposes, that dog has the propensity to be a terrible resource guarder, really high, what we call possession in the dog. So when he has something, he really wants to keep hold of it. But through the means of play, I taught him that relinquishing things of high value isn't always a bad thing, and they're not going to get removed. And so, like when I teach a dog with high possession tendencies how to relinquish things, we teach that out, and there's a number of different ways to do that. And as soon as they do out it and give separation between them and the toy, they get it straight back. And so we start creating a history of reinforcement in the dog that when you relinquish things, the chances are you're going to get them straight back, which builds a positive emotional attachment around us, or the dog relinquishing things of value to us, if that makes sense. Away from that, we got to manage how often our dog is able to get hold of these things and then rehearse their reactivity, or their resource guarding in this instance, should I say. So, yeah, I hope that helps. Any tips for dogs with low food drive? We have a 12-month-old pup that doesn't seem to care much about food at the moment, meals or treats. Is it just a stage? He doesn't always be like this. Sometimes when dogs go through hormonal change, it can affect their appetite. Absolutely. Our method in order to work around that is we start the hand feeding process, but we start in environments where the dog is super comfortable. I'm not going to just take the dog out and starve him till he, starts taking food from my hands, but I'm going to cut out all non-existential or essential food. So I'm going to ditch the treats for a little while, start working that dog's food drive from the baseline up, as opposed to trying to supplement on top. So we cut out all treats. We measure his food out. We take a very high quality kibble, or raw food in some instances, if you can be bothered putting on the glove and the pouch and so on. And we start the dog working through very basic obedience just at home initially for that food. And then from there, we make the job to attain that food incrementally more difficult, as opposed to trying to find things that are incrementally more valuable. If we do the first option, it will build the dog's motivation from the ground up, as opposed to looking for things of high value that our dog very quickly gets bored of. And if you're watching this, you've probably experienced that, where you find the the high value treat your dog is into, and then it works for like a couple of days, and then the dog goes like, "What else have you got?" And that's because that food was only of value because it was novel. And very quickly, you'll start cycling through every new high value treat, and it becomes an endless cycle essentially. So we always start the hand feeding process, for sure. And we start that in the house and then graduate that to outside of the house and then start graduating that to working around things that our dog is going to get externally drawn by, such as distractions. Okay. If using positive only training without a prong or e-collar, in your opinion, how long does it take to alter reactive behavior? Um, I'll be honest, there's a many nuances that go along with this question. So, um, firstly, we have to look at like how are we managing the dog. It depends how long I'm a dog trainer that uses aversives, and I'm very open and transparent around that. I don't use them for the sake of it. I don't use them as personal preference. I use them because of I deem them to be a or a necessary component of treating certain ingrained behaviors such as reactivity. And I'm explicit in this in the channel over and over again. If I felt like a dog could be consistently trained through reward based only methods, then I would do that. I 100% would love to buy into that. Unfortunately, it's just not realistic. If it was able to be done with reward based only methods, then YouTube would be full of reward based only dog trainers, um, proving and demonstrating many different behavioral changes and treating reactivity. However, I'm still kind of waiting to see it. Um, if I truly believed it could be done consistently, time and time again, with these severe issues that we work with, then by all means, that's the route I would go down. Unfortunately, I'm yet to be proven otherwise that it can be done without at least some aversive. And so, yeah, that's my diplomatic answer to that question. Oh God, this is popping up left, right, and center. What protection sport are you involved in? PSA, which stands for Protection Sports Association. It was created by Mr. Jerry Bradshaw over in the States. Very popular in America. It went through a bit of a spike in growth here in the UK, but it's kind of plateaued a little bit, or I feel it has anyway. So I feel like that sport is stagnated to a degree, or the growth of the sport. Still a great community over here, and some phenomenal dogs. We got one leg of our level 2, which is in the upper levels, and it won't be till next year where we compete again. Hopefully, close off that too, and then I think I'll probably put my sporting career to bed and start focusing on the business here at YCA. Okay, what else we got? I've been saying hi to other people walking their dogs. I don't always let my pup greet their dog, and I found this has been helping with my girl's reactive behavior. Okay, so I don't mind people allowing their dog to greet other dogs so long as we put it on cue. If we take our dog out and we let them willy-nilly greet every other dog they see, and then one day down the line we turn around and for whatever reason it is not safe for our dog to have an interaction, and then we restrain them and like try and move them away, where prior to now we've just made it common for them to greet every other dog they see, that can induce frustration. And so, truth be told, I would let my dogs say hello to other dogs on walks, but I always like permiss it myself. And this isn't to be tyrannical or run a dictatorship over my dogs. It is purely just for the sake of consistency. In that, if I do let them just willy nilly say hello to everyone, and then one reason decide not to because of that other dog and that other owner, they've put their hand up and said like, "Hey, my dog isn't friendly. Like, it's not okay to say hello." And then my dog doesn't know that is the rationale as to why I'm not letting them say hello. That's going to induce frustration, right? And my dog might get a little bit pissed off by that. And as we know, emotionally, frustration and aggression are tied very close to each other. If I induce enough frustration by being inconsistent with my dog, that's one way aggression can perpetuate. A lot of the reactive dogs we work with come to our school and take part in our virtual program. A lot of their aggression and reactivity stemmed from a place of frustration. which more often than not stems from inconsistency in what we allow our dog to do and not to do. And a lot of the obedience we do isn't to make our lives easier, or to wholly make our lives easier, isn't because we want to be a dictator over our dog, but more often than not, just so we can give our dog consistent opportunity to sometimes say hello and sometimes not. If allow my dog to say hello to every dog, it might create like hyper value in other dogs, which is going to make captivating my dog's engagement difficult. If my don't say allow my dog to say hello to any dog, then they're going to miss out on social opportunity. And eventually, when a social situation occurs and another dog runs over to them or whatever, it's going to freak them out a little bit, right? So, good question or good point. Janice, my girl is great, but she can be reactive. She's great at shows, but we have a dog on site. She gets her hackles up and does bark when it runs to the fence. It's horrible. Plus, by then she is pulls. That wasn't a well constructed question there, Janice, and I'm not sure what you're asking. So you feel free to ask again. But I have no fucking idea what you're asking me there. My dog is not reactive, but I have two entire males that have had a few fights. What's your thoughts on castration? Staffy 2.5, Shar Pei 8 years old. That is two fucking crazy breeds to have in the same house, especially if they're both males. More often than not, castration is going to do next to nothing, especially if the dogs have had a couple of opportunities to get into that comeuppance, let's say. I think I made up a word there, but I think you know what I'm trying to say. That means you need some authority over those two dogs. I've got, again, 6 dogs, 4 of which are male. Stark and Kobe, 2 male intact Malinois, both working dogs. And that means I need to take more care and due diligence in having authority over those 2 boys and say, hey, you boys need to knock it off, because of, yeah, the propensity for that situation to go wrong is very high, as opposed to like Ranger and Darla, for example, that have never had a falling out in like 8 years of having them. Let me have a look. Do you think a prong collar will increase reactivity in a German Shepherd, even if I never do actual pong props? But when I hold him back from going at other dogs, he is pulling against it. That means you haven't conditioned that tool correctly, and we need to be very careful with the prong collar. As a general rule of thumb, when it comes to dogs, any pressure we put on our dogs that doesn't alter their behavior, e.g., like we add pressure on a collar or a prong, and they inevitably continue to do what we were intending to stop, it acts as like an agitator and a negative reinforcer to that behavior. And so when we condition any tool, whether that be a prong collar, e-collar, flat collar, slip collar, we do that in the absence of the trigger a hell of a lot, to make sure we bring about the intended outcome when we apply pressure through that collar. And so for anyone watching, please don't go ahead and just purchase one of these tools and put it on your dog in hopes that it's going to stop any sort of reactivity or pulling. I think that's a very dangerous game to start playing. We have to make sure, like, the intention of a tool in many instances, or in most instances, is to be able to turn our dog and change their perspective. And we do that a hell of a lot. We can do it through play, we can do it through food work, we do it through a lot of stooge work, even if we just get a friend or family member to start acting as a distraction so our dog feels the pressure and understands how to turn it off. In the absence of that teaching and coaching of our dog, more often than not, that pressure acts as fuel to the fire. And so you'll see a lot of people online argue that certain tools can make a dog's behavior worse. And I would totally agree with that if we do not go and make the effort to condition these tools appropriately. And so we get a lot of people come through having attempted to use these tools, and all it's done is added fuel to the fire. And so, word of caution, please God, just be careful when we're implementing any sorts of tools. I do not recommend you go and introduce a tool to, or such as a prong or e-collar, especially without someone like a professional holding your hand or going through a very thorough conditioning process. Because more often than not, it's just going to make things worse. And yeah, that would be a reason why. Um, I kind of missed your question then, Marta. I'm going to come up and scroll. I don't want to miss you. Jacob, Blade still occasionally runs off chasing hunting animals, even with the e-collar in action. I can't get him to recall immediately when his instincts are on max high. Do you ever think I'll be able to fully let him off of this prey drive? Should I accept that his genetics will inevitably kick in at some point, and even after all the reactivity training and e-collar training we have gone through? It does depend here on a couple of things. That's something that maybe I would opt for instead of trying to recall him away from it. Now I'm going to get a little bit intricate here. I would use more of like a punishment protocol and start teaching him, hey, you're never allowed to do that. And there's a 7-step punishment sequence that we put in place to do that. I would recommend messaging myself or Alicia on asking how to do that. And it might be the case that we put him in avoidance of those animals as opposed to something that we just recall him from. So, for example, if I have my dog off leash and there are certain things I don't mind him sometimes doing, like walking up to a tree and pissing on it, that's something I would use my recall to bring him away from. If there's something if there's something I never want my dog to do, like chase livestock, that's when we go into aversion training and we put our dog in avoidance of those things. So I've done that with both my Malinois. We live in or we work and live in a very rural area where there's cows and sheep nearby. And since I never want my dog to interact with that livestock, we implement aversion training. That's not something I do put on the channel because of that's the propensity for that to go wrong is very high. But Marta, if you reach out to us, we'll be happy to talk you through it. Yeah, like I said, if I have my dogs at liberty and off a leash, I don't want to rely on me having to spot the trigger before they do to recall them to achieve them not approaching that thing. And that's why we put them in avoidance, so they think it's a bad idea to go near them. Okay, Matt, my dog suddenly began growling and getting nervous around my wife, who up until year 3 had zero issues with her in the early mornings or after she showers. Any idea why? So this could be for a number of reasons. What usually happens is something superstitious happens. So um, let's say one day your wife got out of the shower and you stepped on your dog's tail, and then that become a condition to that picture. And what happens is your dog will then, if it was aversive enough, your wife comes out the shower and he anticipates being put through pain. I'm not saying that's the exact situation that happens, but we see them pop up left, right, and center, or whereby something inanimate and completely irrelevant happens, and then something bad happens to the dog. And so, what happens then? Your dog puts two and two together and sees that irrelevant picture as a precursor and a prerequisite for them having their, in my example, their tail stood on. I would question and ask you what your relationship with or what your dog's relationship with your wife is like, how they get on. Does she have authority over the dog? But does she have a good time with the dog? Is she a good cop? Is she a bad cop? Is she a combination of both? Is she more like a roommate to your dog? And there's so many questions I could ask you to really unpack that. Um, I'm not going to say she needs to go and do more with the dog. She could do a lot with the dog, and it might be a lack of quote unquote respect your dog has, or conversely, it might be the opposite issue, and she doesn't do enough with the dog, and he feels like she's just a spare part in the household. So, yeah, there would be a lot to ask there. Um, okay, we want to take our English Mastiff with us in our RV. Don't know what the UK calls that. Yeah, like it stands for recreational vehicle, I believe. Yeah, we call them like caravans or American caravans. She's 14 weeks now. Should she be exposed to more socialization opportunities than a normal guardian dog? I'll be careful what I say here, but you can't really overdo socialization with such a breed. Our mastiffs do have the propensity to be somewhat suspicious of considering their guarding roots, right? And so when we have a dog that has propensity and a genetic bloodline to be guarding, their initial job was to respond to things that are abnormal. And so we want everyday life to be as normal as possible, and all the things we want to expose our dog to in future, we want to normalize that as soon as possible. Critical learning period is said to run from 6 to 16 weeks. And so a lot of our socialization work is best used as is optimally done during that time frame. And so I'd be with this dog, I'd be taking him out everywhere, seeing everything, not to the point of like overwhelm though, and like freaking the dog out, but at the same time, every other day, every couple of days, going somewhere new, making it a positive experience, doing some play, doing some food work, allowing them to interact with people too. I see a lot of balanced dog trainers, especially doing too much engagement with their dog, and that might create issues later on. But rule of thumb, take our dog out, exercise them before socializing them. We don't typically do it at the same time. And then showing them the world in which we expect them to be comfortable with as an adult in that window would be a great idea. So putting her in the RV, taking her out the RV, doing some tethering in the RV, doing some place work in the RV, walking her around the RV, getting her exposed to all the noises and sounds and so on and so forth. Even if you're not going on a trip, maybe go and take a weekend trip as soon as possible and start normalizing that process as best you possibly can, so we mitigate all the contributing factors later on down the line. Jet City Matt, I got the prong collar 5 years ago because of Tom Davis. It stopped him from pulling, but I think it increased his reactivity. He just died at 6. Very sorry to hear that, Jet. I wish I had that Michael Ellis video you released back then. Yeah. If you're interested in tools, please go check out the Michael Ellis video that we put on our channel a couple of months back when I went to visit him in California. As always, that Michael Ellis puts things in such an articulate way. I'm sure you'll take a lot out of that video. Yeah. So that's Jet again, or Matt, sorry. Sometimes the prong can be enough pressure to stop a dog pulling and require very little conditioning. But when your dog then goes into a state of reactivity and arousal goes through the roof, it might not be enough pressure to stop that. And again, as I mentioned earlier, pressure that does not stop or alter a behavior will only add fuel to the fire to that behavior. And so we're essentially like doubly pissing off the dog, which we need to be really careful about. James, my German Shepherd is more reactive when on walks with the family as opposed to me alone. Would this just be a case of starting from basics again with the family around and working him through it? Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. You answered your own question there, bud. But essentially, when your German Shepherd is with your family, he's going to be in a more heightened state of arousal. A herd and breeder dog, and is probably happening, he's constantly checking where everyone is, right? And if someone goes too far ahead, he probably freaks out. If someone's lagging behind, he's probably like freaking out and checking where they've gone. And it puts him in a like slightly more defensive mode, because he's essentially trying to herd everyone and make sure everyone's kept together. And then the propensity of him reaction whilst already in that state of mind is much higher. And so we want to get our dog comfortable with that picture and making sure we're teaching him it's normal for our family to be there, but maybe like they don't necessarily all have to be right next to the dog where he can keep his eye on them, right? Yeah, aversion training for livestock. Yeah, we want our dog to preferentially just avoid that like the plague. How can you tell the difference in body language? What is aggression and what is excitement? We just don't know. Well, the thing is, as I mentioned earlier, if you ever seen Jack I'm going to butcher his name, but the Wheel of Emotion contains every emotion. I did have one around somewhere. Anyway, frustration and aggression are really close to each other. And this is why dogs that were once just super excited over other dogs can overnight seemingly tip into aggression, because they're just so like closely, they're neighbors on that wheel. So if you look at the wheel, it's like a color chart basically. And I think I've mentioned it on the channel a few times. And like I said, a lot of dogs that just started off as hyper-social dogs that wanted just to play with everyone. And here's what happens a lot. here's what happens a lot. We misunderstand the socialization process. We let our dog meet loads and loads of other dogs. We neglect to train them and implement any sort of boundaries and any sort of cues and windows of opportunity, which I speak around about on the channel a lot. They have a very heightened draw towards other dogs. But then what happens? One day they have some sort of aversive experience, so they have a falling out with another dog. And we go, geez, I now need to keep him away from other dogs. And that aversive interaction usually happens because of your dog's social manners from being too excited over other dogs might piss that other dog off. And then they have a bit of a scrap. And you go, geez, I need to keep him away from other dogs. And so you have a dog that's super hypersocial with other dogs, played lots with other dogs, had loads of interaction with other dogs. And then one day we just cut it off. And then that frustration builds and builds and builds, tips over to aggression in many instances. And what we do is we blame it on that one interaction where things went wrong. But in actual fact, it was the mistake we made prior, not enough boundaries, creating clear cut window of opportunities, giving our dog alternate forms of expression other than just playing with dogs, lack of obedience, so on and so forth. And then, yeah, they have that interaction. They go cold turkey with their dog interaction, creates this vicious cycle then where they're now aggressive and they need to be kept away from dogs even more so. And the treatment is a similar treatment as we would with a puppy. Show them how to express their higher state of drive through the means of play and working with you and maybe some obedience, and then slow and incremental controlled exposure to other dogs. That starts with them seeing, sniffing, hearing other dogs before it does them interacting with other dogs. I see people trying to socialize their dogs before they can even tolerate the sight of another dog. That's never going to happen. That's going to make your dog more sensitive towards other dogs. So that's my spiel on that. Matt, I have successfully implemented the Michael Ellis Let's Go U-turn with a hyper female German Shepherd and female Golden Husky. The prong did make my GSD stop pulling, but it didn't help with dog meltdowns. Yeah, gotcha. So probably conditioning issue. We can unpack a lot of these questions. I want to check, like, will your dog play with you? Will your dog listen to you whilst playing? So much of the work I do, and I know I use tools a lot, or I talk about tools a lot at least, right? But so much of the work I do with my own personal dogs and the case study dogs I take on is via play. Play with them for a few reasons, right? And if you take anything away from this live, please do not take the following with a pinch of salt. When I play with a dog, I get more benefits than just tiring them out. Firstly, I can start satiating the desire to hunt. If you didn't know, the reason dogs play in the first instance is to refine and rehearse their hunting skills. And if we deprive them of that, it's going to create some genuine mental issues for our dog. Secondly, if I'm able to throw in a little bit of obedience via play while my dog is in this heightened, frenzied state, I am much I'm going to be able to put my best foot forward when it comes to dealing with their reactive outbursts. Because if you can't stop your dog reacting, it's because of you do not have a line of communication with your dog whilst they're in a heightened, frenzied state. And I teach my dog how to listen to me whilst in a heightened, frenzied state, not around other dogs, but through play. And that's always going to be like one of the first stages when I work with a dog, is be able to take them up into fifth gear, but then be able to cap or channel that really, really quickly too. If I play a lot without control, I can then create an engine accidentally that I do not have the brake pads for. And that can then work against you. So play is only as beneficial as depending on how much control you have of that dog whilst playing. Again, Kobe, good example. The Malinois I adopted last year has come with some severe behavioral issues. He bit someone in the face, and that's why he was rehomed to me. He couldn't manage himself when in that heightened state of drive, and he'd just tip over the edge. The work I've done with him, and if you've ever seen the after videos and how he interacts with the other dogs and staff, like, he's very good dog, very social. The work that I had done with him was 99.9% through play. And I'm not just virtue signaling here, like that was absolutely the case. Um, challenged us of how far we could get through play, and yeah, there's so many more benefits um, than just tiring our dog out. It gives our dog a substitute for their working role. Gives our dog the ability to express themselves in that very heightened state of drive. It builds healthy addictions. And reactivity in a nutshell is an unhealthy addiction for your dog. They're just addicted over the wrong thing. And it allows me to start teaching a dog how to use their ears while in that very heightened state, whilst they're in an adrenalized state. So, if you take anything from today, um, yeah, consider playing with a little bit of control. We got plenty of videos out there if you ever want to check them out. They're there on the channel. Couple of questions. What else have we got? I'm gonna do an hour if you don't mind. Mm. Do you play with your dogs on walks? I play with mine at home in the ways you suggested, but sadly, I'm not as sexy as a squirrel. Can you recall your dogs from rabbits? That's a good question. I can recall my dogs from rabbits. Of course, all of my dogs are recollar trained, and that serves as an insurance model to make sure it keeps them safe whilst they're out in society. I've got two out of my six very high caliber dogs, right? And the propensity for things go wrong for them is really high, given their working nature. And so I believe I have a duty of care to make sure those dogs are controlled, but I also have a duty of care to make sure those dogs are fulfilled too. And unfortunately, what people don't like to admit enough online is aversive control has a role there. Um, I would not like to just leave my recall down to whether or not my dog wants the reward I have at that any given time. And so they are trained to recall via reward and the pressure of a remote collar in some instances. I'm not going to shy away from that fact. I think there's too many dog trainers that are, and too many dog trainers that are using them in private, but not talking about the benefits that they might add to someone like you and your dog's life. Um, and so, yeah, my dogs will recall from prey. They will recall from livestock too, and that keeps them safe and it enables me to have them off lead and live their best life. If I limit that freedom, that's going to create some issues. They're going to be really difficult to be able to handle. And so, um, as in regards to your first question, sorry, um, I play with mine prior to walks mostly. I don't like to play with the boys, the Malinois together at the same time. I feel like that's an opportunity for them to have a little bit of a fallout. Um, but it's good practice for your reactive dog is to play with them prior to um, taking them out and doing your exposure work. And here's how you really need to see this. Um, just like in puppies, we fulfill them before we expose them to the world, and we do the same thing with reactive dogs. So my Stark, my main man, my sport dog, when he was a puppy, every time I took him out to do some socialization work and exposure work and show him the world, essentially, I'd make sure I played with him first so we can satiate that desire to be defensive, to chase prey, and so on and so forth. So he didn't look to external sources of reinforcement in order to satiate those desires that are like pre-programmed in his head. And I'd highly recommend you do the same for a reactive dog. So we show them where they should express that higher state of arousal. And then when we go on a walk, we're working on our redirect drill, we're working on our recalls, maybe a little bit of obedience, showing them the world at a distance that they can tolerate the trigger, but they still find difficult. Sometimes when we play during walks, we can create like uh, a counterintuitive state of anticipation, even if that's just them anticipating you playing with them. That prolonged state of anticipation can be friend or it can be foe. It depends where your dog. We can sometimes get displacement issues where your dog is anticipating good play with you, but then they see another dog and they displace that pent up excitement towards the trigger. Hopefully that makes sense. Grand Moo, you're asking me something about sausage dogs. I can, You might have to ask again. I'm losing some of these. I didn't expect this many people on, to be honest. Oh, where would you begin with a protective dog that won't allow your 3-year-old grandson to hug me and attacks partner every time the doorbell rings? He also sleeps on the bed and lap with him. Well, the thing is with sausage dogs, they're very social dogs, but they can get real possessive really quick. The amount of sausage dogs I've seen that think they're your boyfriend instead of your dog is absolutely fucking insane. And that's because of you've essentially coddled them because they're so adorably cute to the point that they have completely misunderstood the relationship dynamic. And so they can get really hyper possessive of you and they're not being protective. They're not being protective. They don't think you're in danger. They're being possessive, and they're basically a form of resource guarding you. And so, making sure we put parameters in place to set nice and clear cut boundaries with a dog that is a tenacious little fucker, right? They've got a lot of drive. They got a lot of tenacity. They've got fight in the dog, fucking more than most. And I think people often neglect to appreciate that within their sausage dog. Like they should be treated like a Malinois for all intents and purposes because of um, especially certain colors of sausage dogs too. Mine are like chocolate dapple, so they're like the pussy versions of sausage dogs. Whereas like your black and tans or um, your big male ones, especially, like they can be really rowdy and tenacious and powerful and drivey, and they should be given the respect they deserve as that type of dog. But unfortunately, we coddle them, we baby them. They can take over a little bit. They do have that little man syndrome. And yeah, if we go if it typically stems from a lack of boundaries and the dog misinterpreting the relationship dynamic between dog and owner due to lack of those boundaries. So, you know, oh god. Okay, what else we got? I'm just gonna try and Joanne. I have a fear reactive German Shepherd. We've done a lot of training. He now doesn't bark lunge, but if we pass other dogs closely, his hackles will go up and he'll start to pull to get away. Any tips, please? That's where we start the counter conditioning protocol. So getting if we're not getting the dog, if he stopped lunging essentially and he stopped going out of his way to be reactive and he's more in like flight mode, this is where exposure comes in, counter conditioning, making sure we've got a means to reward the dog via food, via play, show the dog the trigger at a distance that he can tolerate and he finds maybe somewhat stressful but isn't like totally freaked out, and just start showing the dog that good things happen in the presence of the thing that you once found aversive. And repetition is key at this point, unfortunately. What we can't afford to do is teach our dog, our formerly or currently reactive dog, that other dogs are something you see once in a blue moon. We want it to be something that they see regularly, because of novelty has like a direct relationship with arousal. Essentially, like the more novel something is, the more excited our dog is going to be over it, or the more it's going to elicit some sort of response. And so repetition is key, making sure we have a means to reward our dog in the presence of that thing, and then incrementally and over time getting closer and closer. Hey Jacob, my Doberman has started laying down on walks when he sees another dog coming towards us and pretty much makes himself a dead weight. He seems excited, but it does lead to a reaction if we don't move. Yeah, that's like a coiled spring. It's like a jack in a box, right? And what you need to start doing, like all good reactivity protocols, is start teaching that dog a redirect or a disengage. When he sees another dog, you should clock it. You should have a disengage marker. We just use our terminal yes marker a lot. We need to start drilling that home, start giving our dog the ability to be able to essentially figuratively turn our back and walk away from that situation. But yeah, he's just like a coiled spring, cocked, locked, and ready to go at that point. And um, yeah, so there's lots of questions we could ask here. What tools are we using? What have we done in the past? Can we disengage our dog? Can they disengage from things of high value that aren't other dogs? So many people that we work with in the first instance come to us with a dog reactivity issue, right? Of course, like that's our bread and butter. That's what we do. And we'll do some very simple exercises like, can your dog turn away from a toy or your partner or the front door? Like, can you put them on the leash and disengage them from that? And the answer is typically no. So, what fucking chance have we got with another dog that's of really high value? If we can't disengage from something of a value of a 3 or 4 or 5, when the 9 out of 10 comes along, we've got absolutely no chance, right? What I want to stress here, the great work you'll get done with your reactive dog first happens in the absence of other dogs, right? Our dog needs to be proficient in play, proficient in disengagement and redirect drills, proficient in understanding what a no or a bad marker means, which I've talked about in the channel a little bit, proficient in a recall, and proficient in those core exercises before we expect our dog to do that job in the presence of something that is a really high draw, right? Same with my dogs. I make sure they've got a, a behavioral skill set and they're proficient and understand that with a high degree of clarity and certainty before I would ever expose them to something that is perhaps emotionally negative to them. Um, so yeah, I say it all the time on the channel. It won't be the first time I use this analogy, but if I say it probably in most videos, if you give me 5 hours to chop down a tree, I will spend 4 hours sharpening my axe, right? And figuratively, what I mean there, I'm building my motivation, my play, my and this is a problem with social media. Anyone that watches social media, all of our videos that blow up, they allude to things being a quick fix. Like, truth be told, there is no quick fix. There are certain things we have to teach our dog in order for them to be successful and overcome their reactivity. But in many instances, that happens in the beginning of the program, and the beginning of the program can be a little bit boring when we're building these foundations and these core exercises, just like me sharpening my axe. So some of these dogs that I've had like the severe case studies with, Travis and Loki, Hades as of lately, the dogs that very reactive towards other dogs. I might have them for like 4 weeks, coming to stay with me for 4 weeks, 4, 5, 6 weeks, right? I will spend a good 3 of those weeks building that behavioral skill set and that behavioral tool chest, figuratively, I mean, before I expose them to kind of other dogs in those tricky situations. But not enough people are spending time investing in developing that dog skill set. And I get flack all the time on the channel where I do eventually expose the dog to the other dog and they don't do anything. That's because of the axe is sharpened to that degree. And that should be, if you get things right, the easiest part of the process. But people do not equip their dog with a skill set, whatever that might be, and they just try and expose it out of their dog and try and correct it out of their dog and draw them away with high value treats. But unfortunately, in that instance, the dog was doomed to fail in the first instance. So we create a set of fundamental behaviors in our dog. We make them very proficient at that. Then the exposure work should be the easy bit. But if we don't create that set of fundamental exercises, drills, like whatever you want to call it, and then expose the dog, he's just going to rehearse the reactivity. The issue is going to compound and you'll be further away. So people that come into our training with instinct program, we give them that homework, and like transparently, it can be a little bit boring in the first couple of weeks, but the results we get week 3, 4, 5 are more results than they've got in the last 3 years in many instances, because if we've had to take things back to the drawing board, rebuild the dog skill set, and then the exposure becomes easier instead of trying to. If you feel like every time you see your reactive dog sees another dog, it's a bit of a wrestling match. You've not given your dog the skill set. That was my rant there. Sorry. Hi, mate. How are your experiences with Labradoodles? I really like them. They get a lot of shit. You get a lot of abuse online. I think in other countries, they have more of a propensity, depending on the bloodline, I think, to be a little bit more nervous, a bit of a shit house. But the ones we have here, like, they're great. I think they're pretty cool dogs. They're like Labradors that don't molt. And it really does depend, like any crossbreed, right? It depends like where the dominant genes are coming from. But I've met some phenomenal Labradoodles. In my time. I had one. It was a footballer's dog, like literally 8 years ago. and his name was Stewie, and he was like one of the fucking coolest dogs ever. I loved him. I thought he was just the perfect pet dog in every way, shape, or form. But then I've met some that are just like car crashes, like genetic car crashes. So, you know, like any dog, I guess. Um, Back to Grandmoo. Thanks, Jacob. This was about the Daxies, by the way. That's an interesting insight. I baby him less than my partner does. FYI, he's a male mini wire chalk tan dapple. Okay, my mini male smooth black and tan was a pussy by comparison. Yeah, so you know, here's the thing with dogs. For the sake of transparency, we don't want to always just be good cop. Of course, we don't want to always be bad cop. I like to think my dogs adore me, and if you've ever seen my dogs interact with me and be around me, and so on and so forth, I'm sure that is evident. But they do have a sense of respect for me too, when I can say like, "Hey, cut the shit." Whereas like my partner, for example, they love and adore her, but they certainly don't have like the same level of respect, right? The sausages do because like they're her dogs, not my dogs. Um, and so when we have a mismatch and we have like too much respect, we're going to have a reserve dog. We're going to have a a withdraw dog in some instances, a dog that is like maybe even some instances like afraid to express themselves. I don't want that in my dogs. But then on the flip side, if we just love, 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 and there's never any bad cop, they can then like take liberties, take the piss a little bit. And so in this instance, Grandmoo 58, it might be an idea that your husband is the one to start implementing boundaries. If he is, we get often relation issues where one partner's good cop, one partner's bad cop, or one is the disciplinarian and one just like dotes and loves on the dog. Yeah, he might be excited when that person comes home from work, but if that person tries to tell the dog what to do, you can then get a little bit of pushback, right? So that's my thoughts. I'm just giving thoughts here, right? End of the day, guys, like I would need to have a full breakdown of these issues, and I'm just giving you my thoughts and perspective on this thing, and I just hope I might trigger something for you guys to just start looking at things differently with another perspective. That's all I'm here for today. Um, I've been watching the Behavior Bible and working with my Malinois for the past month since the government is shut down, and you've seen huge improvements. Still working on bikes. Yeah, so we have a free course, by the way. It's just to try and make dog training accessible for you guys. The link will be in the description of our Behavior Bible. It was what an old. It comes from excerpts of like an old paid course we used to run before we launched Training with Instinct. Like that's free for you guys to do. It gives you a little bit of structure. It's a bit of a roadmap. It'll help, like, truth be told, it'll help with some maybe up to like medium issues. I'm not going to bullshit you here and say like it's going to solve all your problems in the world, but with how much bullshit on advice there is online and the propensity for things to go wrong by picking up the wrong information and picking up that tool without conditioning it, we just put it out there to give you guys a little bit of clarity and structure on what a training system may or may not look like. I'm glad you found my rant helpful. Here's a good question from Martin. How do you know when that metaphorical axe is sharp enough? Um, so when I'm doing my exercises with the dog and sharpening the axe, I want to make those the practicing and rehearsal of those exercises and the circumstances in which I practice and rehearse them as hard as I possibly can, so the real deal almost becomes easy. Like I'm going to really test and challenge the dog um, in our drills. Again, a hell of a lot through play. I might even get my partner the other side of the garden with the dog's favorite toy, and like really get her running around like a rodeo clown, and then disengaging my dog from that situation. So then, by the time we see another dog at like 100 yards away, that becomes an easier task because he's already operated at like a difficulty level 9, right? And so as best as we can. Just like when I compete in sport, when I train, ideally the training we're doing in the non-competition sense is a couple of levels harder than when we have to go and do the real thing, right? Um, and it's the same for like a reactive dog. The fabricated situations and setups I do with the dog as best I possibly can. And we incrementally work up to this point as best as I possibly can. I want to make as close to the same or ideally, ideal world, harder than him seeing another dog or whatever the trigger is. This is applicable to all triggers. I have a 5-month-old Dutchy Malinois mixed female who gets manic and barks non-stop to chase my 3.5-year-old Malinois. I play with them separately now, but she does it on walks. Any tips? Yeah, so in your garden, take a camping peg, take a leash on your puppy, leash the puppy up, and do some basic like lower arousal, like gears 2 or 3 work, not like full play. And your puppy's going to have a bit of a meltdown, and that's okay. Let them have a little bit of a meltdown. And then what I'm going to do is play with my older dog, do some work, do some work, do some work. As soon as puppy calms down, which eventually, like, time will allow that to happen, and she chills and she puts her chin on the floor, I'm going to put my older dog in a down. I'm going to go to the puppy, reward with my duration marker with food. And then I'm going to repeat that process, incrementally making it more difficult for my puppy. Yeah. And that'll come with age, right? The puppy is still a puppy. They're gonna want to be involved with fucking everything. You know, I'd make sure that puppy's crate trained and having time in confinement whilst I'm with my older dog. Whenever I introduce a new dog to my pack, one of the first things I teach them is how to tolerate not being involved with what we're currently doing, because it's not feasible that they feel like they should always be involved, and it's just a version of FOMO, right? Fear of missing out. Bean Schmidt. I have a 3-year-old GSD that is good with strangers until they look at or engage directly with him. Then he growls. He is good if they ignore him. Again, maybe a lot to unpack here. But what I would do, I make sure my figurative tools are prepared, and I've got my disengagement marker and my disengagement protocol, and I get a stooge. Essentially how this works is we create motivation in the dog. With that motivation, which can be created, by the way, with that motivation, we start tying in these fundamental behaviors. We then proof these fundamental behaviors: play, disengagement, our redirect drill, our recall, maybe a long down. That's about it. We then proof them around fabricated, emotionally positive distractions as much as we can. Then we introduce controlled stooges. So emotionally negative draws, but controlled. So we have control of that person. We get a helper. We then do our rehearsals there before we look to tackle real life. What does everyone do? They go straight to real life, right? And hope to wrestle it out with their dog. So if you've got up to that point and everything is prepared adequately and you're ready for the controlled stooge work, you get a friend to help you out. You get a friend to just stand there, take a look at the dog. As they both meet eyes, you disengage your dog. As they both meet eyes, you disengage your dog. You do that enough times, the dog's going to automatically disengage, and it's going to soften up their glare. If you haven't got the propensity to be able to disengage your dog and give the dog something they want, you perhaps need to start nearer the beginning. My rescue dog was allowed to destroy sofas, and now he's destroying mine. How can I stop him? We limit his access to the sofas. We make sure we cultivate some healthy hobbies through play. And then we only give him exposure to sofas while we can supervise and give him feedback on his behavior until we trust him to being alone with the sofa. That's a quick one. Husky, Malinois, Pyrenees mixed. That's fucking crazy. Who's making that dog? That is sometimes reactive. I have to work on her attention, but she gets bored so easily, I can't seem to get her to care. Pyrenees are quite aloof, and as are Huskies, but the Malinois opposite and other side of the coin, right? So download the Behavior Bible, go and do the food motivation stuff, and work from like I mentioned in the beginning of the live, cultivating motivation from the ground up, not the top down. We start looking for the high value treats to get our dog interested in interacting with us, I promise you that is a race to the bottom. I play and exercise with her a lot. Playing a lot is good so long as your dog stays in the game. If we want to build more desire to play, general rule of thumb, we stop playing before the dog gets bored. Pat Stewart uses an ice cream analogy, which I steal from him quite a lot. When we go to a nice restaurant, right? And at the end of the meal, they give us some dessert. They give us a small portion, and we eat that and go, fuck, that was good. I'm going to come back here because I want more of that. But conversely, when we go to the supermarket, we go and buy a liter of ice cream. We eat it all in one go, like the fat fucker we are. And we go, I don't want to eat ice cream for another month or two. And that's the power of satiation. So we want to play, if we want to build desire with our dog to do any one thing, we stop before they get bored. If we want our dog to get bored of something, such as other dogs, we don't, we expose them to that thing until they get bored, right? So yeah, hopefully that helps. Late to the stream, but I wanted to thank you for the video with Pat about the vibration levels. It totally explained the videos you put out about play in a way that made sense. Yeah, Pat's very good at explaining things. Probably better I am than explaining definitely certain topics. And we half the reason we went to Australia was to try and bring these people onto our platform and offer you guys a different perspective on things, like we did with Michael, with Melanie. If you've not watched the recent one with Jazz, we got one coming up with Uncle Glenn Cook, which I'm sure you'll all find very interesting too. So yeah, I'm very happy that you found that helpful. That was the aim of the game, right? Of course, like YouTube is a lead acquisition system for you guys to take us up on our training services, but at the same time, um, to be able to bring these people onto the platform, have these conversations, and share that attention. You guys are so, you guys so we are grateful that you give us that level of attention, and share it with people that can bring an alternate perspective. We're very happy and proud to be able to do that for you guys, especially someone like Pat that I looked up to for a very long time when my juvenile period of training dogs. And so to be able to offer him that opportunity to present to you guys and do such a great job is, yeah, we don't get much from that other than, sharing someone's deep understanding of dogs, which is phenomenal. And yeah. Okay. Could you argue that a hypersocial dog that sees everything as emotionally positive is less likely to develop superstitions with tool use? That is such a great question, Robin. Yes, I would. We have to be more careful of superstitions when our dog is already previously emotionally negatively drawn. So if they're feeling defensive, fearful of that trigger, we have to be a little more diligent in how we do our stooge work and apply aversives. Whereas, like, if they just fucking want to be best mates with absolutely everyone, which I would much prefer to have that type of dog, then the margin for error, I believe, to be a lot less when we're applying aversives. So, yeah, good question. Was it a mistake to let my reactive German Shepherd sleep next to me on the bed? A lack of boundaries. He was sweet and mellow, but I had a reactivity meltdown. I wouldn't let him approach other dogs, and he never got to play. Here's how I feel about the bed thing. If you've got boundaries with a dog, your dog understands yes, no, will doesn't like take liberties around you. I don't think it's a problem. I don't think it's a problem that they sleep in the bed at all, right? If the dog is resource guard in the bed and we have a fundamental breakdown in our relationship dynamic, there could be rationale in not letting the dog sleep in the bed. But I feel like a lot of trainers put massive emphasis on it. But I feel like they put too much of an emphasis on it. I think there's so much more we could be working on. And like, if you take your super reactive, anxious dog out of the bedroom and they just fucking freak the fuck out because they're used to sleeping in bed with you, that doesn't put them in a great learning mindset for the next day. And like, ask me a couple of years ago, I might have given you a different answer. And so there's a lot of depends on this. Like, if our training's good, if our dog doesn't take liberties, if they have that sense of love, and respect for us, we can play with them and all the things we've spoken about today. I don't think it's as big as issue as a lot make out. If the dog is guard in the bed, though, of course, then that's something we need to limit. All right. Okay. Jacob, appreciate all you do. Just arrived at the stream, so probably the same question as before. However, White Shepherd, 1 year old, really social and friendly, does great in home. However, he wants to play with all other dogs really bad, weak recall, and little to no attention for me or my wife. Candy or toys when he is still leashed and seeing other dogs to play. What to do? Yeah, Aaron, I have pretty much answered that question. We cultivate motivation from within the dog, from the ground up. We teach the fundamental exercises, recall. We teach disengagement. Which is the same fucking thing, really. We teach maybe a long down. We teach play. We teach an out. We teach the dog how to stay chill via the long down in the face of things of higher value. And we equipped our dog with behavioral tools to tolerate things that draw their attention. Only once we've got that in the back pocket should we, and that process doesn't take as long as most people think if um, we do it properly. Essentially, I was going to go on another tirade there, but I might be boring you all. So yeah, we do all of that. It is a system, you know. Some instances, this is a marathon. Not as long as you think, though. It should not take you months and months and months on ends to train these dogs. I've taken some genuine bad cases, and we've had very nice progress in 4 to 6 weeks. We have to just do it in a way that builds and we have momentum. All right, momentum is absolutely critical. So yeah, sorry, Aaron, I have answered that question. But yeah, all of these are answered either in our channel, behavior Bible, so on and so forth. Got a 14-month-old staffy male who is now starting to show alpha traits and resource guarding, non-aggressive, but will answer if someone else tries to dominate him or any of the dogs. Any tips? Certain dogs have that dog in them, right? And especially our bull breeds, and we have to give our bull breeds the utmost respect because of they don't mind what we call a set two in some instances. And we have to appreciate that certain breeds of dogs do have the propensity to want to fuck other dogs up. And that is absolutely fine. And if we neglect to respect and appreciate that, we can often cause more harm than good. So just like everything, having a good relationship with the dog, them understanding when you are best pleased with their behavior and when you're not best pleased with their behavior. If you can't tell your dog inside the house that they've done a good job and get their tail wagging, but also conversely, inside the house, say, hey, cut the shit, that's where you start. That is where you start. If you don't have like that binary communication system in the easiest environment possible, that's your starting point. I have a very scared dog. Rescue dog who struggles to turn off when outside. Do you have any tips for making contact with him when distracted? I feel stuck in transition from safety to outside. I do that via play. So I'm going to take the dog into a sterile environment and get that fucker addicted in playing with me, right? So like, I want to make that toy like, can I say crack cocaine? I'm going to say crack cocaine to that dog. And then what I do is I start graduating where we play that game to start including external and environmental factors that might have previously freaked him out a bit. And the thing is with play, a dog theoretically, right? Whether I buy this or not, but I do see the benefits. A dog can't be in like a jovial, playful state and be fearful at the same time, and we can use that in our favor. So we build drive and desire to play. We add a little bit of control in that game, but first and foremost, with a fearful dog, I just want him to really love the game. Once we have the love of the game, we can start introducing things that our dog may be externally negatively drawn by. And we take that game and we copy and paste it in as many different kind of environments as possible to the point that we can graduate to like level 10 where our dog gets freaked out, right? But everything has to be done incrementally. I want you to think of training your reactive dog like that game you used to play in school. What's the time, Mr. Wolf? It's the same game as the red light, green light of Squid Games, where you want to make incremental progress. But if you go too quick and you fall over and you get caught by the guy, you might get unalived by that thing. Or in What's the Time, Mr. Wolf, which is a much more user-friendly game, you get told to go to the beginning again. So this is an analogy I use quite a lot. Momentum is really important, and taking incremental steps is important. But a lot of you get to the start line and you're sprinting, you're doing too much too soon. You're throwing your dog into situations where they're not prepared to deal with, because you've not done the foundation and groundwork yet. They're tripping over, they're getting caught out, and then we start again, right? And that's how I see dog reactivity. Slow is smooth and smooth is fast. And the reason why we get such quick results with our clients is because of we don't wham, bam, thank you, ma'am. It's definitely not the case. It's actually the opposite. Front end of the process is quite kind of slow, which allows for a smooth transition into the back end of the process, which then becomes fast because it's smooth. But if we do go wham, bam, thank you, ma'am, we usually kill our momentum and have to start again at the beginning, right? What else we got? Do you recommend a slip lead for a strong dog? This goes for any tool. If it's conditioned correctly, that has its place. I wouldn't want anyone to take, and this is why I have a moral dichotomy when I post about tools and stuff. On one hand, I want to talk about the advantages of tools, and I don't want them to become a topic of taboo. And I certainly don't want a virtue signal like some bullshit dog trainers on this platform that tell you and fucking indoctrinate you that everything can be done by throwing cheese on the floor. That is certainly not the case. We train about 100 dogs a week here in our school in person, and probably as many online at any given time across a team of 15. This is what we do. This is what I've dedicated the last 10 years of my life. If I believed I could do it with just reward, you sure as hell should believe that that's exactly how I would do it. Let me be frank. Dogs are my life. I adore them. I've dedicated the last 10 professional years to doing right by dogs. And so if it could be done in that way, that's how I would do it. I promise you. And don't you think it'd be easier for me to market my dog training services without the use of tools and tell you all it could be done via food? No, because I'm being truthful. Not sure where I'm going, where I was going with that, but at the same time, I don't want anyone to watch my channel and just willy-nilly slap tools on dogs, because I don't think that does dogs a favor either, right? And so this is why I'm very hesitant to put certain conditioning techniques out there, because I don't want to. And this is why I'm always adding in caveats to anything I say, especially when it comes to tools, corrections, aggression, punishment, especially. I want to educate people and be open and transparent, and that's how we can get great results and enable dogs to live way better, more fulfilled lives with the use of control, and in some instances, aversive control. And then the dichotomy I continually in an internal battle with is, you know, are people going to misuse that content too? And so, hence why we're doing more chats like this and more lives like this, so we can dive a little bit deeper. Edna, I tried to slip lead from my reactive GSD at one time. It just choked him out. Used it one time. Yeah, that's a conditioning issue again, I think. Okay, here's a good question. If you use an e-collar but don't need it very often, does the dog forget what it's for? E.g., very occasionally needed for recall, but otherwise a well-behaved dog. No, so long as you use it when you need to use it, you'll be absolutely fine. Like if I walk my big boys, my two Malinois, out and about on e-collars, it is very, very rare that I ever have to push the button. It's probably like once in 10 walks, like honestly, with those two boys, because they're very well conditioned. And like when it comes to aversive training, like the process of avoiding an aversive becomes reinforcing in itself. And so every time the dog doesn't get stimmed, it actually is then reinforcing in itself. So reinforcement is happening, just not in a way you understand, but that's a whole video in itself. Okay, so being there around other dogs, still on leash, let him lay down and reward for the right behavior is one thing we could do, besides all the other stuff you say in your vids, of course. Yeah. Matt, you are the failed to condition tool guy. That's okay though. And you're very welcome. You've asked some good questions, mate. Family dog who's reactive and has a strong herding drive becomes invasive to others as she lacks the understanding of boundaries. Dog get fed up and correct, but she won't back down, ends in fights. That's where you need to referee, Amelia. That's where you need to make sure that you are correcting on behalf of your other dogs. Seldom is it the case where we're going to let dogs like have at it and figure it out themselves because of more often than not, that goes wrong, right? Um, so that's where we need to develop a communication system with that particular dog and advocate for our other dogs and act like a referee. Like if you're in a multi-dog household, part of your role, at least part of your role, is to act as the referee in social interactions, right? Ranger's pretty good at telling Stark when to like fuck off and leave me alone, and Stark yields to that. Same with Darla and Stark. So Darla, for those of you who don't know, is one of my rescue dogs I got a long time ago when I was very early on in my career, from Romania. Genetically, like fucking terrible compared to Stark, a completely different dog. But Stark is very respectful of her. Very, very respectful. And this because one time as a puppy, she absolutely fucking suplexed him, right, into next week. Now, if she had waited too long to get that correction in, he's now at the point where he's so big, strong, tenacious, big boy, big balls, that there's nothing she could do to correct him without causing genuine harm. And so, like, that was instilled on him. And that's what I mean by conditioning punishment. That's obviously a very exaggerated example, and you don't need to like suplex your dog. God, please, God, don't take that from this. But at the same time, if we've missed that boat and our dog is now non-receptive to the corrections from our other dogs, that's where we need to advocate. How long would you expect to use a slip leash before the dog is conditioned to not engage in the negative behavior you were trying to correct? It's a little bit of a how long's a piece of string question, that one, Rachel. Um, so it doesn't take long to condition. All right. You can teach a dog what a slip leash means in one session. However, the process that does take longer is generalizing it. So if you've taken your dog to 100 places and every time they get someone new, they're in the habit of pulling on the leash, chances are, even if you do correct the slip leash, for example, when you go somewhere new, they might try it on. They might try the old behavior on. And we have to do like a mini reconditioning session every new place we go, just for a little while, for our dog to generalize that set of rules is applicable to not just the garden where we condition, not just the front of the house, but everywhere. And when we train reactive dogs, we prepare to walk them by compartmentalizing everything, teaching that core fundamental behavior skill set that I spoke about, and then generalizing that in as many different places as we possibly can. Once we've done that over 10, 15 different places, it then becomes a little bit of a habit, habituation kicks in, and we have the trained dog. So it's, to answer your question in short, it's not the conditioning that takes long, it's the generalization of the conditioning in many instances. Hi, Jacob. Ridgeback getting very protective around pregnant owner, reactivity towards other dogs. This is new. Yeah. Again, there's lots of ways we can break this down. We have to check the relationship between said pregnant person and dog. Obviously, if they are physically not able to work with the dog, then of course we would approach that topic with great care. Um, um, there's a bunch of things I can ask about here. He's probably being a little bit possessive. The dog will go into like be a little bit have more of a propensity to be defensive when someone is pregnant in the household. It might be a fucking pheromonal thing or something. I don't know. I'm not a doctor, not a midwife. I'm a dog trainer. But with all of these like nuanced cases of like, oh, my dog is reactive to balloons, or my dog is now reactive to my dog is now reactive in the presence of my pregnant wife. My dog is now reactive next to the pram, and so on and so forth. All the same concepts apply. The treatment is still the same. We create motivation. We take that motivation. We weave that motivation into a core set of fundamental exercises, skills, or whatever you want to call it. In the TWI program, we call it the 5 pillars. We condition those 5 pillars, and then we take the dog. We don't just go out and walk the dog and expect to feed back on his reactivity as we walk. We go out and practice with that third party or that factor, which is your pregnant wife. Sorry to call her a factor in this instance, but yeah, you know what I mean. The circumstances, the condition to the reactivity, which is the pregnant partner in this instance, and we treat it as like any other reactive dog or reactivity case. Um, Oh, I'm lost. You and Michael Ellis make me want to be a dog trainer. There's so many reactive dogs that need help. Yeah, we're in a reactivity pandemic at the moment. Great for business, not great for dogs, not great for dog owners. So don't know what's going on. Combination of people making bad choices in terms of what dogs they're getting. Combination of I think generally the information available on the internet uh, doesn't align with best practices in terms of doing right by dogs. Combination of, to be frank, more of a mummy and daddy culture when it comes to raising our dogs. We're treating dogs like children a little bit more, and we're disrespecting their genetic makeup. Um, my dogs are fucking basically my kids. Like I adore them, like they're my kids. I don't have kids, but I still respect them and understand them as dogs, right? So I don't dress them up or any of that bullshit, and I freely allow them to roll in fox shit, which I wouldn't do with my actual human children. And that is literally just the difference, seeing them for what they actually are. And unfortunately, not enough people are doing so. And it's partly social media's fault, partially a cultural thing, and a misinformation thing too. I'm really sorry for such basic, boring question. Just worried about my boy. Any advice for fireworks? I try not to make a fuss in the past, but he has developed a fear. Do thunder jackets work? In my experience, thunder jackets do not work, but that is just my experience. I've not really had much to do with them. I've only had feedback from clients that have told me they don't work, and perhaps they didn't work. They wouldn't have to come to training. So, like, I don't know. Um, you kind of missed the boat this time round, but fireworks is something we prepare for. And so, again, if that's something our dog is fearful over environmentally, play is a good one. And just incrementally working things up. Even in the past, you know, those little snapper fucking toy things you had as a kid, like the little white packets, and you throw on the floor and they go. I've done work with them around fearful dogs. So I've got them to play, and I've got a friend to like throw them on the floor till they go bang and acclimatize my dog to that. And then we got like a little cap gun as well. We do it with sport dogs all the time because in PSA they have to tolerate gunfire. So we do that a hell of a lot with sport dogs in terms of how to get them to tolerate those sorts of sounds and so on and so forth. So um, preparation for next year. This year is going to be damage mitigation. You close the curtains, you put some music on. Don't pander like to your dog and start acting like a weirdo because of your dog's freaked out. That's just you showing the dog abnormal behavior is going to make more of a deal around the situation. Put your dog on a leash. You can cuddle them, you can comfort them. You can't reinforce fear. That is bullshit. But you can act like a weirdo, which makes your dog think the situation is more abnormal than it actually is. So when you start like going, oh, everything's fine, they're just like, fuck, mum's freaking out as well. Maybe the thing I'm freaking out about is actually something worthwhile being freaked out about because mum's freaked out because she's acting like a weirdo and totally different to how she normally acts. Hopefully that makes sense. Um, I'm gonna ask like maybe I only planned on doing an hour, so I'll answer a couple more questions, team, and then I'm gonna go have my lunch and take my dogs out. Pleasure having you all here, though. I appreciate all the questions and you giving me a time of day to come and ask these. It's super cool. Um, End of the day, like a few years back, I was just some kid that was obsessed with dogs, right? You know, I just had a dog and just thought it'd be really cool to hang around with dogs all day. And now we got this like big school and stuff, and all these people online saying nice things and looking at our content. So we're always very grateful, even though I can be a bit abrupt and to the point nowadays. We very much appreciate you being here and asking your questions. We're very grateful for that. I'll answer a couple more, then I'm gonna go see to my dogs, make sure they're had a piss. Uh, Wait a minute. Recently rescued a dog that's very reactive to visitors. We make sure they ignore him and do not let him approach until he's calm, but it seems to be getting worse. It's kind of the same question that's been answered, right? Um, and so I'm not going to bore anyone by repeating the answer. It's the same thing situationally, even to the house, to the car, to the pregnant wife, whatever. The process is still the same. I don't really buy into like that every dog is different and every dog is it needs a different approach. Like I believe every dog needs motivated to want to choose preferential behavior, and we can create that from the ground up. I believe every dog will benefit from learning how to play, to disengage, to recall, to stay calm in the presence of triggers. I believe every dog that we expose those drills to should be done in a controlled setting in the first instance. And then I believe every dog, once we start introducing uncontrolled settings, that should be done at a threshold the dog finds comfortable or able to complete the task, but at the same time, they're still finding difficult enough that we're actually making progress. Um, Thank you, CL. How old am I? I'm 31 years old now. I'm almost 32 at the end of this month. Any plans for another dog now Lenny's moved on? No, I'm gonna free up that space to start doing more case study dogs, 7 dogs was a lot, and I wouldn't have got rid of Lenny unless he was going to someone like Simon. It just made total sense. Obviously, Simon the mutt nut is a great friend of mine, and he's here a few times a week, so I still get to see Lenny. If it was anyone else on the planet, I wouldn't have seen Lenny go anywhere else. But Lenny's going to go and do some sport work with Sai. I've got enough on my plate in terms of sport with Stark, and so yeah, it's very rare that I would ever move a dog on unless it was very special circumstances in which presented themselves that they did with Simon looking for a dog and Lenny probably needing a handler to give him the best foot forward in terms of his potential to go and compete in a sport. You're very welcome, Matt. Yeah, all good, man. Your 4 border collies are more reactive after exercise. There could be because of they've, adrenaline or after they've adrenalized their cortisol, which is like the stress hormone. And when the cortisol level's high, the propensity to react is higher too. And so maybe too much exercise can actually be a too much exercise pre-exposure can actually be a bad thing, and there's somewhat of a sweet spot. Anton, I live in the city center, so the transition to outside is quite dramatic. Yeah, I get that. My dog locks up when he in the elevator doors. My dog locks up when the elevator doors open and we had to walk through the lobby. Any technique to get him comfortable? You're gonna look like a knob, but you start playing with him and actually doing the exercises around those environments, because the exercise is essentially, or the elevator, sorry, is essentially serving as the coil to the jack in the box. And so to mitigate that, we allow our dog to express themselves. So it might be the case if you need to start playing with your dog in that lobby, looking like a bit of a knob to people, but that's all good because it's in the best interest of your dog. Hi, Jacob. Thanks for being out there. I'm trying and failing to help my 2 farm rescue Newfoundlands to tug and play. Any tips aside from trying every day? Maybe you try every other day. Maybe you're trying too much. So if you look back, go back on this live and listen to the ice cream analogy, that should clear some things up. Thanks for your time answering all our questions. Much appreciated. I'll take some information. Yeah, cool, cool. You're very welcome. Cool. I'll wrap it up there, team. Pleasure having you all. In terms of links in the description, you can apply to work with us. We've just launched Training with Instinct 2.0. So that is our virtual one-to-one program. It's very close quarters kind of handheld program throughout of everything we've been speaking about today. Perhaps some people on here have already done it, and I'm sure you've got great rewards from doing so. You can download the Behavior Bible. If you want to take me up on my mentorship program and improve yourself as a dog trainer, then you can just message me on that other platform, starting with I, ending in G. at JM Dog Trainer. You give me a shout on there if you want to inquire about that. Otherwise, you got a pet dog that you want us to help you with through reactivity. We've just spent the last very grueling month and a half or so rebuilding the whole program to make it better for you guys. We actually took 400 uh, recordings of clients. We fed it through AI to get all the most asked questions and then made sure we answered those questions as to a best of our ability within the program. We do daily group calls like this for our Training with Instinct clients. You get my personal mobile number too in this first instance of Training with Instinct version 2. Yeah, at JM Dog Trainer, that's me on Josh. Don't like to but yeah, you get a direct access line to me as well on WhatsApp, where you can ask me questions about your dogs, send selfies, whatever you want to do. I just doing that for this next cohort of Training with Instinct to make sure that version 2 is as best as possibly can be for you guys. I just want to thank you all again for spending some time with me this afternoon. I'm going to maybe do this weekly. I've thoroughly enjoyed it. I sincerely hope it was beneficial and cleared things up for you guys. You need any help from us, or you want to whatever, you can even book a call with one of our team and just like grill them a little bit on whether our services are going to be right for you or not. They won't be super pushy and salesy, I promise you that. If they are, you let me know and I will knock their heads together. um so yeah, give me a shout if you need anything. But other than that, have a wonderful day. Hope you and your dog are well. If you're on here and you haven't subscribed, by the way, don't be a dick. Just hit that subscribe button. It takes you like 3 seconds, you bastards. But yeah, YouTube pays us money for the views you guys give us. We give all that money to charity, by the way. So is Yorkshire Rose, a local charity to us. They received maybe like £1,500. So you hitting that subscribe button helps my business and it helps dogs that are, you know, don't have it as good as maybe your dogs and my dogs. So we would be very grateful if you could do that for us as well. But yeah, thanks so much. See you next week if you want to come next week. Bye, team.